What's up, y'all? Bill Cammack here. Today we're looking at Sonimus Britson, which you probably can't tell with all the stuff that's on the screen, so I'm going to explain this stuff and then we're going to loop these loops and listen to Britson, and you can decide for yourself whether you hear any differences. First of all, what we're looking at is green is the drums, which is the drummer program from Logic. Red is the bass. Blue is an acoustic guitar, which is here but is gray because it's currently muted, which it isn't actually muted, but it's not soloed, so these are soloed, so these would be the only things playing if I press play. But that's why this is gray, because it's not going to play if I press play. Yellow is vocals, which is here and here. This is a reverb. This is a drum parallel track. This is a delay. This is our 2-bus or mixed bus or output, where we have Britson bus, VUMT, and multimeter. That's the 3 of these right here. So what we're going to do first is listen to the individual loops. Alright, you get the picture, so now I'll explain more of what you're looking at. Up here is where we have Britson Bus, which everything is going through. That's what we're looking at today. Also over here on all the channels, the individual channels, we have Britson Channel, which is this. Britson Channel has the gain, which is basically the volume. It's got this ×2 button right here, where you can change it from 32 dB to 16 dB as far as how much gain you can add. It's got high pass between 1800 and all the way off. It's got low pass between 20K and 1K. It's got fat. The other elements are output compensation, which doesn't mean that the output stays exactly the same regardless of how much gain you add, but it attenuates it a lot. You can have your volume meter pre or post. You can have your filters pre or post, which is pretty useful. And you can have mono processing, which I think has something to do with Reverb. On Britson Bus, you have this again, and you have 3 different versions, which the manual says are EQ curves. So you have default flat, master loudness, master bright. VUMT is a volume meter, and also multimeter is a volume meter. It's also a spectrum analyzer. So if I go back to the drums, you can see that every time the snare goes off, it's somewhere around 200. The kick would be here, snare. This is the high frequencies over here. These are the actual volume levels. This also gives you the volume levels, and I wanted to bring this up because the meters on a Britson Bus kind of trip out. Watch the difference between these two. So I don't know if Sonimus is going to leave the meters like that or change them, but I use VUMT as my actual meters. While we have the multimeter up, we can actually switch it into a different mode here. The other thing is that we have a few sends, which means a channel is sending information to a different channel. So the drums, for instance, are sending to the reverb, which if I double click this, it shows up right here. It's the reverb. So drums are sending to verb and coming through this. If you click on this, it'll show you how much it's sending. And the reverb here is a Logic Space Designer. It's going through a channel EQ, which is doing nothing. And it's going through Britson Channel. turn the rest of these off. So that's what just the drums sound like when they're going through the reverb. The rest of these are sending to the reverb also. And the reason why you're hearing these vocals lower is that this is sending less volume at a -20 than this is at a -0.1. And the reason it does that is because you have a certain amount of reverb that you want for each particular element to place it wherever you want it in the mix. Before we get to Britson, there are a couple of other elements. The bass has a UAD Pultec on it. This is the on-off switch. Acoustic guitar has a Cooper time cube on it. I also could have selected wet solo, which would have taken the main track out of it entirely. But since I used this as an insert instead of a send, I didn't use the wet solo. The first vocal has a UAD 140 plate on it. You can see the tail dropping off. I'm going to power it off. The second vocal has a Dimension D on it. Well, wait a minute. The second vocal has a Dimension D on it, but it's also, besides the verb, sending to a delay. The delay that it's sending to is here, which is another Cooper time cube. So that's why it's repeating. Alright, so the first thing we're going to do is take off the delay. Delay on. Power off the Dimension D. The only other element is that the drums themselves are sending to a parallel drum track, which is here, which has a UAD Fatso Jr. on it. we'll move forward to Britson and the filters.